Welcome to Capital View, the weekly program on state politics and government and how it might just affect you. Joining me this week on Capital View is Charlie Wheeler, Professor Emeritus of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at University of Illinois Springfield and longtime former State House correspondent for Chicago Sun-Times. Welcome, Charlie.
Always good to be here, even if it is just digitally.
Well, welcome to our world. Also, Jerry Nowicki, Capitol Bureau Chief for Illinois Capital News and avid White Sox fan, excuse me. Welcome, Jerry.
Right. Shout out to Lucas Giolito and his no-hitter.
Well, okay.
Hey, Jerry, I probably should have put on my White Sox hat, too.
Is there an asterisk if it's a pandemic no-hitter? I don't know. It seems I wasn't able to see the game myself, so perhaps I'll have a chance to review it. There's been a couple developments here in the dog days of summer, so to speak, in state government. A lot related to the pandemic. Pandemic-related stuff is dominating almost every aspect of life. It seems so these days. We also have the Republican National Convention that is taking place as we speak, and state Republicans are making noise as well too about their prospects for November. Let's start though with matters of quite literally life and death. The Illinois State Department of Public Health recently announced a top to bottom review of nursing home investigations and complaints and procedures that took place between the beginning of the pandemic, sometime in mid-March, and the end of June, going so far as to bring in both a firm that is acknowledged as a healthcare expert to review whether complaints were properly handled, as well as former U.S. Attorney Courtney Cox to review whether the department's investigations into long-term care facilities during the pandemic were up to snuff. How big of a surprise is this? A, B, how concerned should we be about it? Jerry, you've been looking into nursing homes. What do you think?
Right. So nursing homes in Illinois have been underfunded for a long time. State government disinvestment has been an issue that we've known about, we've reported about for who knows how long. But with this specific situation, it seems like it involves the investigation of certain abuse and neglect complaints. And I think it was from March through June that they weren't happening as they should have. That doesn't mean they were still doing compliance check for COVID-19 protocols and that type of thing, but I still need a little bit more information on it, but it sounds like they said they were mischaracterized some of the complaints, which sort of led to the abuse investigations not happening. I don't remember the number. They said all those investigations are caught up now. They've conducted them, and there were a number that proved that there was information that needed further investigation. I think it was in the teens, if I remember correctly, but that could be that a resident fell and the nursing home could have responded correctly, but it still warrants further investigation, the fall and the circumstances surrounding it and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, in my discussions with nursing homes, sort of unrelated to this, I've heard that they're in the same wild, wild west the governor has described in procuring PPE, or at least were at one point. Now it's coming more from IEMA and county health departments. But there has to be some better oversight. I mean, there's no way to control the spread really in these congregate settings, but you know, it's not an ideal situation in any case for nursing homes.
I mean, it's already cost two people their jobs at IDPH, two top officials who were in charge of overseeing the long-term care facility program are no longer at their posts. They've been replaced. To me, I mean, I think to a lot of folks that seems to indicate that there's perhaps some flame to go along with some smoke. Is there any way to read these tea leaves? And one thing that I wonder about, rightly or wrongly, is under Pritzker's predecessor, Bruce Rauner could not have mishandled the Quincy Veterans Home Legionnaire's disease situation worse than he did. There were all kinds of all kinds of evidence of not being straightforward with the public and certainly with the families who were affected. Is there any, am I reading too much into this? I mean, is Pritzker taking a look at what happened with the Quincy Veterans Home and saying, nah, I'm the best course of action here is to act sooner rather than later?
I think the public needs to, I think we, journalists, the public need to be able to learn a little bit more about this. We need more information. And I think as a Republican, maybe Tom Demmer called for more hearings on it. And it makes sense, you know, that this has to be aired. There got to be more details about it from what was distributed in their news release. I think it was WBEZ in Chicago that had initially broken the story, maybe in July, about the persons that were relieved of their duties. And then this came out almost a month later, or roughly a month later. So I think hearings on this are a good idea. We got to have somebody sit down and tell us what happened.
Former U.S. attorney kind of like perks ears up, should it, Charlie, when we hear that, oh, they've brought in a veteran prosecutor to take a look-see?
Well, I think they want to review exactly what went on. And part of it was, as I understand it, there were something like 272 cases of potential abuse and report that were reported to the department. And during that period, as Jerry said, from roughly mid-May to the middle of June, they just weren't investigated.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it was because the department was totally focused on trying to deal with the outbreak of COVID-19 in the nursing homes across the state. But even so, you shouldn't have allowed those things to fall through the cracks. Yeah. As Jerry said, the top two people, or you mentioned it, the top two people, one was fired and the other was put on administrative leave and then resigned. Mm-hmm. And bringing in an outside firm to look at it, what's happening, in my mind, that's probably the best way to go about it and figure out, was this just something where people were overwhelmed because of the fear of the virus? Or was it people not doing the job that they should have been, not being attentive enough, and try and figure out what happened and make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, those are excellent points. At what point does the pandemic become an excuse that's not an acceptable excuse? I mean, clearly we've evolved in our understanding of the situation.
Well, I would say it's not an acceptable excuse in the sense of mitigating what went on. It's an explanation maybe of why it happened.
Sure. Okay.
I think what's clear from this investigation is that the administration and the public health director, Dr. Giese, is not taking this as, oh, well, this is to be expected. What can we do because of the pandemic? I mean, they're made a commitment that this will not happen again, which I think is appropriate.
Yeah, they did seem to get out in front of this. I don't know if quickly is the right word, but this is something where, by appearances, there have obviously been concerns about nursing homes and the pandemic, not just in Illinois, but New York State and several other states, about how things were handled, particularly early on. It strikes me that the governor's gotten out fairly quickly on this one. Am I wrong? Is this something where he's still able to control the agenda on this, or is he going to be driven by forces beyond his control?
Well, I think he's getting out of it, pretty much in front of it and not letting it get out of control. And it reminds me, and again, here I'll be dating myself, and we lost a great Illinois governor just recently, Governor Jim Thompson. He had a situation with salmonella that broke out up in the Chicago area, and he was getting information he thought from his public health director, who was on top of the situation. Turns out the public health director was on vacation somewhere and kind of phoning it in. And when Thompson heard that, he fired the guy on the spot. That was the end of it. So that's, I think Pritzker behaved appropriately here in getting rid of the officials who were supposed to be overseeing this area of the nursing home and making it clear that he's not going to accept this kind of, what would you say, lack of oversight in the future. Because under state law, as Jerry, as you wrote, there's a certain time period, depending on the seriousness of the offense, it has to be investigated within a matter of hours or within a week or within longer. And that's very important for the people who are in the nursing homes, because the reason they're there is because they need that kind of care.
Mm-hmm. Is there any possibility whatsoever, because some of part of the work that the state does is at the behest of the federal government, which provides funding. Is there any possibility along this chain that Illinois is going to have to take the steps that it's done because it's acting in the stead of the federal government in terms of Medicaid funding and that sort of thing in regulation of nursing homes?
That I don't know. I suppose some of the money that was provided by the federal government to deal with the issues specifically related to the pandemic, and excuse me, because I've not studied the budget, or I don't recall how the budget allocated, but I assume some of that money would be available to pay for the cost of protective equipment and testing being done at these nursing homes.
Yeah,
as Jerry said earlier, we've got a long-range problem of underfunding human services that dates back even longer than the prior governor.
And from cradle to grave, both at the nursing home level and at the early childhood level. But go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I spoke to the one of the representatives of the Healthcare Council of Illinois, which is a nursing home advocacy group, and they said homes have not begun to receive the money from the CARES Act as distributed by the state. They've been told sometime mid-September, earlier mid-September, to when that money will come. And that's going to have to basically be PPE and some staffing stuff, that bonuses that have had to be paid to get workers to come into these nursing homes at this time. And it's going to be eaten up pretty quickly from the way I understand it.
What's your sense of it, Jerry? I mean, in terms of, at least locally here where we're broadcasting in Sangamon County, there was, we've had, I believe at last count, 38 deaths, perhaps 39, but the majority of them in a single nursing home fairly early on. We haven't heard, at least here in Central Illinois, a lot of stories about nursing homes now. I mean, that was the story last spring. It's not the story today. We're hearing more about cases that seem to be more scattered. Have they got a better handle on this? I mean, what explains what seems to be fewer reports of hot spots in nursing homes than we once were hearing about?
I don't know if there's fewer reports. I mean, there's certainly better infrastructure in place for distributing PPE at this point than there was in the beginning of the pandemic. There's still more than 4,000, more than half the deaths are in nursing homes at this point, and they're still ticking upward. I mean, is it a change, or are we just more desensitized to the death counts? Or are they just meaningless? I mean, they're not meaningless numbers, but do they just go in one ear out the other at this point? And we fail to take notice. I don't know. I mean, there's those numbers are still climbing.
Yeah, those are good points. Pandemic-wise, this nursing homes and this investigation that's been announced by the governor's office isn't the only pandemic-related stuff that's been happening lately. Masks in restaurants and bars now mandatory statewide. Was that going to make a difference? Who's going to enforce it? So what if the governor says you got to do X, Y, Z? Are people really going to do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I mean, enforcement. They have the new JCAR rule the pass-through JCAR that can enforce it by punishing the bar or restaurant. I don't know if this is just more of a direction to people who are willing to wear masks, telling them, you need to do this anytime you're sitting at that table when you're not putting food in your mouth, I don't know that I think we're at where we're at with masks. There's probably not going to be much to change the activity for people who don't want to wear them or who are wearing them. I don't know how much is going to change.
Charlie, you look like you've got something to say.
Well, I was going to say it's not something you're going to be able to enforce in the sense that, there's going to be law enforcement standing at every table to make sure you have your mask on when the server comes by. But in a way, it's like seatbelts. People who have, how can I say this without being totally offensive? People who are intelligent wear seatbelts because it's the right thing to do and it saves lives. You don't know when you're going to be in an accident, not your fault, somebody else. That seatbelt protects you. And so it's the same thing with the mask. You're protecting others and you're being protected by the masks that they wear. And so you're either somebody who uses your God-given intelligence, or you're somebody who decides, hey, I'm a rugged individual. I don't have to worry about all that stuff, and there are people who have that mindset. And maybe it's, what's the word, evolutionary Darwinism at work.
Well, I mean, just a purely personal aspect of it. I just returned from a road trip. I journeyed from central Illinois to the West Coast and back again, and saw, in my estimation, this is just what I seem to think, I saw more folks wearing masks than I think, and particularly once I got back. I'd been out of town for 2 weeks and returned last weekend. It seemed to me that more people are masking up than had been in the past, and I don't know whether that's a matter of orders that are coming from the state, or just social consciousness and forces beyond the thou shalts. But it does seem like it, like at least there's no way of being perfect about this. Just my own observations. I mean, am I off base here, or is there any way of measuring? Has anybody measured? Is there a way to measure about more folks taking responsible steps?
Yeah, I am not one to be able to talk about whether people are doing it more or less, because to be honest, the only time I go outside my house is to get the paper in the morning, get the mail in the afternoon, and to walk around the block around dinner time to get some exercise. But I've not been anywhere else to see whether anybody has a mask on or not. Now, my kids do my shopping. They go to the grocery store, and they say that there seem to be more people wearing masks than before. So
yeah, and I think
the word's getting out.
I think that's something that some folks don't always remember, is that you're of, I don't want to call you of an advanced age, but you and I, as I've said before, I'm asthmatic. I fall into a risk group, and maybe we take this stuff, a little more differently than others, because I try to stay home, as much as I can, and what a wonderful home I have. Masks aren't the only thing in the news, of course, and nor is the pandemic. There's also Republicans. They're always around. And this week is the national convention, and the head of the state party, Tim Schneider, has made some bold predictions about the future of the GOP in Illinois. He says we have a real shot at turning the state red. Is he right?
Well, it could be that there's better turnout than expected in some of the elections with the ComEd scandal, all the Democratic members that have been indicted or charged or whatnot. But turning it red is probably a stretch at this point, but you never know how quickly political tides can turn. I mean, who knows? I don't make predictions anymore.
Well, that's a fair point, because on the one hand, we have the current heads of the Republican Party saying what you would expect, perhaps the heads of political parties to say, saying, as our next president here is whoever it might be. And in this case, we are going to turn Illinois red. At the same time, you have former Governor Jim Edgar telling several reporters this week, not a chance he'd vote for Trump, and pretty much said he didn't vote for Trump last time. Where is the Republican Party at this point? in Illinois? I mean, are they more in the direction of Governor Edgar, a more moderate sort of thing, or are the Trumpites really in charge? Who is running the show in Illinois when it comes to the GOP?
Well, I think with all due respect to Mr. Schneider, the odds of Donald Trump carrying Illinois are pretty slim. I've often used the analogy it's likely as I'll be the starting quarterback for the Bears or something like that.
They've done worse.
Well, the Republican Party has changed dramatically from what it was back in the days of Jim Thompson and Jim Edgar.
Yeah.
And the demographics of Illinois have changed dramatically as well. Once upon a time, Illinois had the Democratic city of Chicago, Republican suburbs, and downstate made the difference. Nowadays, the Republican Party is mostly downstate. The Republican Party is a supermajority in the legislature. They only have
the Democratic Party.
I'm sorry. The Republicans are a super minority. They only have 59 out of the 177 seats, 1/3 of the seats. And of those 1/3, and I added this up the other day, there are only 14 and only there are only 24 in the suburban area. The rest are downstate. And downstate Democrats are very few. The Democrats are mostly in the suburbs and, of course, in the city of Chicago. There's only like 5 Democratic legislators south of Springfield. And that includes 4 in the Metro East and 1 in deep southern Illinois. It used to be a lot more Democrats down there, but as the mines closed, as industry moved away and those blue-collar union workers' jobs disappeared, the Republicans are very much a regional party in Illinois. They're a downstate rural party, and that doesn't bode well when all the population growth, such as it is going to be in the suburbs once again.
Sure, but I think he's banking on maybe. I'm conjecturing here, just to some extent. It would seem that as you get more footage of civil unrest, the law and order argument.
That's obviously the goal.
That's going to have an appeal downstate, I think. How's that going to fly in the suburbs?
I don't think it's going to apply very well because you look at everything else that the Republicans are tending to stand for. Plus, the suburbs have changed. The South Cook County, once upon a time, was solidly Republican. Now it's solidly Democrat. Part of it is because the black folks from the south side of Chicago, they've moved into the south suburbs. Same thing with Western Cook County. Then you have the growth of the Hispanics that made it possible for Democrats to win legislative districts in Kane County, Elgin and Aurora, and in DuPage County up in the northwest or the northeast corner of DuPage County. That would have never happened back when I was a reporter. But because of the attitude that the national Republicans have evinced about immigrants, and they're talking about brown immigrants, people from Mexico, remember, they're rapists, according to the president. That doesn't play well.
Yeah.
And so the Republicans have got to figure out a way to appeal to people other than the rural white voter. Now, they're trying it with this law and order, and it worked for Richard Nixon, I guess, many years ago. But I'm not sure if it's going to overcome the other problems that they have just as a party with a national image set by Donald Trump.
Yeah, it is very much a return in some respects to, and this has been noted previously, to 1968, 72-ish law and order and the silent majority. And at the end of the day, the silent majority elected a Republican in 68. Now, to compare Donald Trump to Richard Nixon perhaps might be apt in some respects, but probably not in most.
Yeah, it's probably not fair to Nixon.
I suppose that depends on one's perspective. We have a minute left. Very quickly, Republicans in the legislature are calling for renewed hearings. There had been a legislative ethics committee forum to what are we going to do about these horrible ethics issues that have come up since the pandemic. Of course, the ethics questions have gotten only hotter and deeper. Now Republicans are saying, let's hold more hearings. The Democratic leaders of the commissioners committee, now we're going to write a report and call it a day. Is this going to amount to anything? I mean, how many political points could be scored here? And again, quickly, we've got to wrap.
Yeah, it's probably the Ethics Commission at this point is a self-fulfilling prophecy for Republicans who said it's not going to do much when they voted for it.
Well, fair enough. I mean, it's happened. We've seen this happen before with prior efforts at instituting ethics in the legislature. As I said, we are now out of time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on Capitol View, and we hope to see you next week.